The Jewel in the Dragon's Neck. Otomo no Miyuki, the Grand Counselor, called together all the members of his household and announced, "A dragon carries a shining 5-colored jewel in his neck. Anyone who can get one from me will have whatever he desires." His men, hearing these words, said, "Your lordship's commands are exceedingly gracious, but such jewels are not easy to come by, and how could we possibly get one from a dragon's neck?" The Grand Counselor retorted, "Servants should try to fulfill their master's orders, even if at the risk of their lives. I'm not asking for something from India or China that cannot be found in Japan. Dragons are constantly rising from the sea and descending from the mountains in this country. What makes you think it's so difficult?" "In that case," said the men, "we shall say no more. However difficult it may be, we will go and search for the jewel as you command." The Grand Counselor smiled. "You have acquired quite a reputation for being faithful servants of your master. How could you disobey my orders?" He sent them off in search of the jewel in the dragon's neck, stripping his palace of all its silk, cotton, and copper coins to provide them with the means of paying for their food along the way. "Until you return, we shall refrain from eating animal food," he promised. "But don't come back without the jewel." The servants departed, each with his instructions. "He told us not to return without the jewel from the dragon's neck. Let's just hie ourselves off in whatever direction our feet happen to take us. What a crazy thing to ask of us," grumbled the servants. They divided up the valuables they had been given. Then some returned to their homes, while others set off for places they had long wished to visit. All abused the Grand Counselor for having issued such unreasonable orders, impossible to execute even if they came from a father or master. The Grand Counselor next announced, "I should be exposing myself to ridicule if I asked Kaguya Hime to live here without even altering the place." He proceeded to build a magnificent house for her, its walls lacquered and sprinkled with gold, and its roof thatched with silken threads of many colors. The rooms were furnished with indescribable splendor, and paintings on figured damask hung in each alcove. The Grand Counselor, certain that Kaguya Hime would become his bride, set his concubines to work making preparations for the wedding, and, neglecting his first wife completely, spent his days and nights alone. The counselor waited every day for the men he had dispatched, but no news had come by the new year. In his impatience, he disguised himself and went in great secret to the region of Naniwa, accompanied by 2 retainers. There he made inquiries. "Have you heard anything about the men of the Grand Counselor Otomo, who sailed off to slay a dragon and take the jewel in its neck?" "What a strange story," replied a boatman with a laugh. "We have no boats here that do that kind of work." The Grand Counselor thought, "What an irresponsible answer for a boatman to give. He doesn't know who I am. That's why he talks that way." He reflected a while, then said to himself, "I am strong enough with my bow to shoot dead any dragon that shows itself. I'll get the jewel for myself. I won't wait for those rascals to come straggling home." He boarded a ship and sailed around from one arm of the sea to the next until he reached the distant ocean off Tsukushi. What happened then? A terrible gale began to blow. Everything went dark around them, and a storm tossed the ship helplessly hither and thither until they lost all track of direction, and it seemed like the wind would surely blow the ship out into the middle of the ocean. The waves lashed again and again at the ship, sucking it down, and lightning flashed almost on top of the vessel. The Grand Counselor cried out in utter bewilderment, "I've never been in such a horrible predicament before. What will become of me?" The steersman replied, "In all the years I have been sailing the seas, I've never seen such a terrible storm. If the ship doesn't go down, it's sure to be struck by lightning. And even if by some good fortune the gods spare our lives, we'll probably be blown all the way to South Seas. It's all because I serve such a crazy master that I must die like a fool." He wept. The Grand Counselor, hearing these words, cried in between violent bouts of vomiting, "When aboard ship, I trust in what the steersman says, as in a great mountain. Why do you say such disheartening things?" The steersman answered, "How should I know how to help you? I'm not a god. It's all because you were looking for a dragon to kill that the wind has been blowing and the waves raging. On top of everything else, we're even getting thunderbolts raining down on our heads. The storm has been blown up by a dragon's breath. Make your prayers to the gods, and don't delay." A good suggestion, said the Grand Counselor. God of steersmen, hear my words. I intended in my foolishness to kill a dragon, but from now on I'll never disturb so much as the tip of a dragon's hair. He bellowed this assurance in a loud voice, now standing, now sitting, shouting and weeping all the while. Gradually, the thunder abated, perhaps because he had repeated these words at least 1,000 times. Lightning still flashed a little, and the wind blew hard as ever, but the steersman commented, You see, the storm was the dragon's doing. The wind now is favoring us. It's blowing us in the right direction. The Grand Counselor paid no attention to these words. The wind blew for 3 or 4 days and brought them back to land. The sailors recognized the coast as Akashi in Harima. The Grand Counselor, however, imagining that they must have been driven ashore somewhere in the South Seas, heaved a great sigh and lay flat on his face. The men aboard the ship reported to the government office on shore, and the local officials went to call on the Grand Counselor. Even then he was unable to rise, but continued to lie on his face at the bottom of the ship. They spread a mat for him in a pine grove and unloaded him from the ship. Then, for the first time, he realized that he was not in the South Seas, and with great difficulty managed to stand. He looked like a man with some horrible sickness. His belly bulged out grotesquely, and he seemed to have plums for eyes. The officials could not hold back their smiles when they looked at him. The Grand Counselor gave orders to the officials to have a sedan chair prepared for him, and he was borne home, groaning all the way. When he arrived, the men he had sent out, who had somehow got word of his return, appeared and informed him. We couldn't get the jewel in the dragon's neck, and that's why we didn't come back to serve you. We've returned now that you've found out how difficult it is to get the jewel. We're sure you won't punish us too severely. The Grand Counselor sat up. You did well not to bring one back. Dragons belong to the same species as the thunder, and if you had tried to capture the jewel, many of you would have been killed. And if you had actually caught a dragon, it certainly would have meant the death of me. I'm glad you didn't catch one. The cursed thief of a Kaguya Hime was trying to kill us. That cursed thief. I'll never go near her house again, and don't you go wandering around there either. He bestowed on the men who had failed to bring back the jewel that little remained of his fortune. When his first wife, from whom he had separated, heard about this, she laughed until her sides ached. The roof that had been thatched with silken threads was pillaged completely by kites and rooks to line their nests. People asked, Has the Grand Counselor Otomo gone off to find the jewel in the dragon's neck? No, said others. Where his eyes should be, he has stuck stones that look like plums. Oh, they answered, that's plumb foolish. And from that time on, people spoke of any ill-starred venture as being plumb foolish.